Each week at this time we do something called a community moment where we welcome a voice from the Oasis community. Get up and share a thought for the day. It's a lot of times it's just a topic you're passionate about, something you want to share with the community. We've had so many great topics. If you'd like to do a community moment, please get with me and we'll get you on the schedule. We'd love to add some more voices to the table. Today we're here from a repeat performer, the always thought-provoking Giugi Carminati. Giugi.
Today my community moment is about a book that I've read called Gumption by Nick Offerman, and I have to check the time. Can you throw something at me at 10 minutes? Oh, it's right there. Okay, good. 10 minutes. Got it. My husband gave me this book. I did not know that Nick Offerman had even written a book. I just thought he was funny, and he's a stand-up comedian, and I like Parks and Recreation, and that's where I know him from. And my husband gave me this book for my birthday in June, and I was on vacation, so I managed to read it. And it affected me a lot, and so I thought it would be worthy for a community moment. So if you don't know Nick Offerman, he's a stand-up comedian, and he's also an actor. Okay. So, well, no, we just skipped ahead. The point of the book, which was on the previous slide, is Gumption is actually a collection of great Americans. And he lists a pretty long list, I think, 21 people that he considers to be great Americans. And how he selects them is that they are actors or musicians or leaders of men and women, and then he has, which by the way she's not listed, but then he has Hillary as one of the names that he lists, and they can be woodworkers or boat builders or farmers, and that's already something that was interesting, is that they're not the people that you usually think of as great Americans. They come from all sorts of different walks of life. So the first person that he talks about is George Washington, and he debunks a couple of myths, which is interesting. And it's a really well-researched book. You get to learn a lot about these people that he's talking about. So as a teenager, George transcribed as a writing exercise, as a teenager, 110 rules of civility and decent behavior in company and conversation. And so some of them were: associate yourself with men of good quality if you esteem your own reputation, for it is better to be alone than in bad company. Speak not evil of the absent, for it's unjust. Take no salt or cut bread with your knife greasy. That's actually a sexual reference. Which it took me a really long time to figure it out. And rinse not your mouth in the presence of others, which I thought were cute. Which was a good start, and obviously you get stirred reading about George Washington, and you're just reminded about the fact that we have this notion of the American Revolution, but really it was a bunch of ragged people who, as Nick Offerman points out, didn't have shoes. The soldiers didn't have shoes, and they were fighting one of the mightiest military powers of the time, and it was a foolhardy and crazy idea to think that they could overthrow them, but overthrow them they did, which was sobering. And then he talks about Ben Franklin, who loved to swim, was fascinated by the physics of the tangible world. He established the first library in Philadelphia because he liked reading. He established the U.S. Postal Office, no biggie. He also, but the thing is that greatness comes also with the fact that sometimes you have dud ideas. One of his ideas was the air bath, which consisted of getting naked and sitting in a bathtub in a room and opening all the windows so that you could bathe in the fresh air. Which was good for me to remember. Look, you can have lots of ideas and some of them are duds, but it's okay. He took long walks with his father to witness joiners, carpenters, bricklayers, woodturners, brass workers at their work. He would spend 1 to 2 hours a day, and he was hoping to repair in some degree the loss of the learned education my father once intended for me. And this is where it really started affecting the way, it has affected the way I lead my life. Employ thy time well if thou meanest to gain leisure. Leisure is time for doing something useful. This leisure, this diligent man will obtain, but the lazy man never. And I thought, that's amazing. Like, I think of leisure as, like we think of it, I'm going to watch a TV show, but is that diligent? Is that really doing something useful? And I found that my productivity all of a sudden went up, because instead of saying I'm going to work out and then have some fun time, okay, well, how about your working out as your fun time? Or how about playing the guitar as your fun time? Or how about something that is helpful and useful? How about we make that our leisure time? And then live diligently working at our vacations to raise an income in such a way as to leave a remnant of time for more leisurely pursuits. But he doesn't mean leisurely like leisurely where your brain shuts down. He means leisurely as still something that's productive, but in a different way. Then he talks about Frederick Douglass. And Frederick Douglass was amazing. I mean, I knew about the abolitionists, but to read about his life. So he started life as a slave, and then he learned how to work on building ships. And he taught himself to read. Here's the beautiful thing about how he taught himself to read. He was put in a house where a little boy was being taught to read by his mom. And the mom he started taking the books and like doing the writing exercise underneath the other boys. But then the father got very angry because he was a slave. He was not supposed to be learning how to read. So they sent him out of the house to go do work somewhere else. And he went to a shipyard. And they would mark SF for starboard side forward and larboard side rear for aft, which was LA. And those were the first 4 letters he learned how to read, because he knew it was S and F and L and A. And this man, that's how he learned how to read. And then he started writing poetry, which is heartbreaking poetry about watching the ships go free and that he's not free. And it's amazing for a man who's learning how to read literally from stuff that's carved in wood. And then he writes that one day he finally fought his master. And he said he understood he'd be a slave forever, which was not true. But he said, "I did not hesitate to let it be known of me that the white man who expected to succeed in whipping must also succeed in killing me." So basically he would be a slave, but he would not be a beaten slave. And that was, I get chills now. It was heart-wrenching to read that. It was heart-wrenching. Then he became a public speaker. And he was very afraid of public speaking. He was very nervous, and he got over it. And he became an abolitionist public speaker. And he coined this phrase, "Power concedes nothing without a demand." And I filed a suit in the Eastern District of Texas, and I'm outnumbered, and it's over institutionalized racism. And people call me and they say, "I'm so glad you did this, but I can never speak up because, bad things will happen to me if we speak up, but I'm so glad you did this." And they say, "Well, why do you do this?" And my answer now is Frederick Douglass, because power concedes nothing without a demand. He talks about Theodore Roosevelt, and Theodore Roosevelt was wimpy and asthmatic. And he describes himself, "Having been a sickly boy with no natural bodily prowess, I was at first quite unable to hold my own when thrown into contact with other boys of rougher antecedents." So he began hiking and then boxing, and then he became, he was just tough as can be. But he started out wimpy and asthmatic, which reminds me that most great things are built. They're not just born. Eleanor Roosevelt was wealthy, but very aware of the fact that wealth was not forever, and she had no reason to pull herself up by her bootstraps, but she wrote, "It always amuses me when any one group of people takes it for granted that because they have been privileged for a generation or two, they are set apart in any way from the man or woman who is working in order to keep the wolf from the door. It is only luck and a little temporary veneer, and before long the wheels may turn and one and all must fall back on whatever basic qualities that they have." He then talks about Wendell Berry, and I'm not going to go through all of them. There are many other people that he talks about, but these are some of the highlights. Wendell Berry is a writer. He wrote Nathan Coulter. He moved back to a Kentucky farm because he wanted to write about the people in the land he knew most intimately. And Offerman talks about the concept of doing good work, and what does that mean? And the fact that he hates that sentence, "Thank God it's Friday." Because really, does that mean that 5/7 of your life are despised? That you're not doing good work? You're not doing work that means something to you for 5 out of 7 days? And then one thing that started making me think was, more importantly, the collegiate system and the importance that's placed upon it has demeaned and is doing away with the trades, which really made me feel that I really don't know how to do much of anything. I'm a lawyer, I built a business, that's great. But when it comes down to it, I felt so useless. Like I don't know how to do anything with my hands. I feel useless. And then Barry talks about the insidious American dream that tells people they'll be happier if they can just get the new car, the new home, the swimming pool, or the wife. And finally, this was the sentence that resonated with me from Barry's chapter. But I want to keep telling young people, if you get into this with the idea that you're going to win, you're not going to last. The reason you get into it is because it's interesting work to do and because you're enjoying it. If you're not having any fun, you better quit right now. It's not fun, it's fun. That's important too, which I will get to. And I actually go back to thinking about that. I do a little bit of criminal defense, and it is an unfair it's an unfair and awful system, and I sit with my clients and I'm enraged at what's happening to them because it's unfair and it destroys people's lives. And I have strong thoughts about the war on drugs. And I get so angry, and sometimes I'm like, I could just be doing my civil work and I make a ton of money and then I don't have to deal with this. And then I remind myself, I get into it because it's good work, because somebody has to do it, and because if people like me leave, there's no one left. And that kind of made me feel a little bit better about how frustrated I was. Laurie Anderson had an interesting statement. I think parents should buy their kids a house. They should go to college later. So basically she's saying, instead of sending them to college, buy them a house. They spend all their time, the first 10 years of their lives, working up to knowing what they want to do so they can get a job, so they can get a house. Give them a house. It's pretty arbitrary to go to college. To do what? I just thought that was an interesting thought. And of course she has many others. The story of how Yoko Ono met John Lennon is just amazing. His Offerman describing the fact that he walks into her house and he realizes that this is where she saw her companion of 15 years be ripped apart from her in a very violent way, and she stayed in that house. That just takes your breath away, that is how she stood up for him. That's how she stood up for their legacy. She didn't leave. He talks about Conan O'Brien, Carol Burnett, Jeff Tweedy, Willie Nelson. I mean, just amazing people. I knew nothing about a lot of them. Some people I didn't know at all. Wendell Berry, I had no idea who it is. She talks about Olmsted, who designed the Central Park in New York. And here's the thing. Nick Offerman, you wanted to think about him as a stand-up comedian, but actually he describes himself as a woodworker, a writer, and an actor. And the fact that he's a woodworker is true. He runs a woodworking shop. He reads and writes woodworking magazines. He finds meaning and purpose in building things, learning and improving on a scale. He built a boat. So a couple little canoes, but he built them. And so how it affected me is that it redefined leisure, redefined working out. I take a walk or I jog in the morning, but I'm not working out so I can stay a size 8, 10, 6, whatever the hell I am one day, right? I go because it's good for me, because I get to be alone, because I get to push my body for an hour, I get to think. And actually some of the best ideas for my firm come from that hour of just doing something else. I started taking guitar lessons. I read a lot more. I started taking tennis classes. And I don't answer work emails or phone after 7:30 p.m., which is for a business owner really hard because I want to. I'm like, I need to give myself some time. And then what it reminded me, and that's my final point, is that the fact that I can do this means that I'm one of the lucky ones. I am really fortunate. And that the fact that, oh, thank God it's Friday, it's so easy to say, well, 5 out of 7 days of yours are terrible. Some people don't have a choice. And so whatever choices you have in your life, the fact you can choose your TV program, the fact you can choose to go out for meals, the fact that you can choose what to do with your weekend is a luxury that many people don't have. And it's actually made me a much happier person because I realized that I am really one of the lucky ones.